constitutional crises. That is what we are facing. What does that mean? That means that I have as much an idea of what's occurring or what's going to occur as you. Why? Quite frankly, because of American exceptionalism, our founding fathers and the politicians who followed didn't think that we required guardrails to protect against our own government. Because of that, there is a gray zone as to authority when it comes to the disqualification. There comes a gray zone as to whether or not it has to be invoked, as to whether or not Congress is required to actually execute on it. There's a lot of ambiguity. Why? Because no actual political entity, particularly Congress, has been wanting or successful in actually clarifying our constitutional foundations. Why? Because if you allow yourself into a situationship, if you sleep with someone else, it's not cheating because you never made that official, right? That's exactly what it is. As long as there's no guardrails, then when there is an ethical concern, it's not really illegal, or at the bare minimum, it's not unconstitutional, which is much more severe. What does this mean? This means that the traditional mechanisms in which we could solve this problem of an illegitimate president is not going to work. And particularly if you include other things like fancy stuff and election, there's an even more unprecedented factor to take in. And that reality, what do you do? That depends on how compromised the state is. That depends on how deep it goes. In that reality, a lot of non-traditional solutions open up. Why? Because it is unprecedented, which requires legal and political ingenuity that requires going above the congressional approval. How do you do that? It could be the military. Yeah, it could be the military. And the only reality in which it could be the military is where every branch is compromised, where there is no success and a remedy because of how politicized it is. Within that reality, I can see that there has to be a much more higher force that is unprecedented. Where that would be triggered from is the question that I don't have. Wait, follow me here, and I'm not gonna put it in the background because then my ADHD is going to lose track of this. So, do you remember the last executive order, right? And do you remember the last, what is it, resilience strategy? Former President Joe Biden executed. What did that do? That positioned the reality that certain federal agencies that are critical to how government runs are capable of running on their own under a constitutional crisis. Like other reasonings, right? But also if there's some sort of constitutional crisis where there's something happens and somehow they don't have authority above, right? So they're capable of still functioning, so the infrastructure of the United States basically doesn't collapse. In this reality, would these agencies be capable of executing and enforcing certain missions against the executive? Do you follow me? I have to read it again. So in this reality, would they be capable of not needing authority from above? Because it's already a mission that has been investigated and the outcome has been agreed upon. It just has to be enforced. Within that reality, are they capable of acting without any congressional approval, etc.? Now I reckon the question becomes whether these agencies would be capable of responding before the illegitimate POTUS guts them, right? And this is totally, I guess, a tinfoil hat because it has not come together all fully, as you can tell. But it would be interesting because the question becomes who has the authority. And if it's POTUS, then obviously he wouldn't give an authority against himself. But if we position those executive orders, then would that make more sense? Because now agencies are capable, if there is sufficient evidence, of acting against. I don't know. Interesting take. But it's important to understand that it's going to be the non-traditional legal avenues that will fully be the ones who are much more capable of obtaining success in this scenario, because the traditional ones can be compromised, the traditional ones can be politicized. So waiting on Congress doesn't get checked by any other institution. It's the people, but the people aren't part of the government. We're not a branch. So in that reality, when there's a Congress member who has an ethical concern, you have to wait until election to get them out, which is ridiculous. But that's how it is. So in general, we don't have checks and balances because because no one actually checks Congress. It has to be the people, but the people are not a branch in government, which makes no sense because if there's supposed to be checks and balances and no one checks Congress, then why isn't the people at least a silent branch in government, at least codified in the Constitution, so that we're actually capable of checking them right away instead of waiting for next election, right? But point is, there's so much ambiguity and incompleteness in our Constitution that this is going to require an unprecedented solution. And depending on what's involved, that's going to dictate the point forth. However, it's important to consider that it took Mustache Man 53 days to gut democracy in Germany. Tick tock. Tick tock. We don't got time. It's already what? Day 5? He's gutting it fast. So if there's any deep state going on, they better show up.